did want to bring this guy on. He's so generous with his time. If you're in the evening kind of listening and you want to listen to Mo live, you can on KFI in Los Angeles and across the iHeartRadio app, of course, and also his podcast on iHeartRadio. In other words, his radio show is podcasted. Brilliant mind on politics and on culture, and I would say on a lot going on in Southern California, to our Southern California listeners. He's so terrific to be with us today. How about it for Mo Kelly, everybody?
Mark, great
Mo,
to see you,
thank you again. Yeah, I want to run this clip. Albert, what I'm thinking of before I get Mo's drill down on some of what we heard last night, I wanted to get the clip that was kind of a wrap of everything. You see the DJ. I love that they started with a DJ for I mean, this is just genius on the part of the Democrats. They're obviously the big tent party, but you really felt the tent last night. So I can't play the music, Mo, because I'll be demonetized. But what a great idea, don't you think? I mean, they took what is really a boring process and they made it exciting.
Well, beyond that, you have DJ Cassidy, who has millions of followers, and each state with its own song was about 60 seconds long or so, which is bite-sized, it's digestible, it's social media shareable, and those went out all around the world. And the conventions, I talked about this the last time I came on, they're celebrations, the coronations, they're about sending the ticket off into the world, and that is what was accomplished last night. Now, you may, as a Republican, or a Republican may not say that I liked it, but it's not meant for you. It's about launching this ticket, and it was effective in that way. Now we have to look for the data to support it. We'll look at voter registrations. We will look at the viewership numbers. The viewership numbers for night one was higher than the first 3 nights of the RNC. Use that as a comparative point. And also fundraising. So from what I can see and what I can tell so far, it did exactly as it was meant to do. The roll call was just brilliant.
Yeah, and you saw Lil Jon, and you saw Sean Astin, and is that Spike Lee in the foreground? I can't really.
Yes, it is.
For the New York crowd. I thought AOC was really good as speakers go. I thought, I'm thinking of AOC because I think I'm looking at this party that was. The breadth of the Democratic Party is so expansive, Mo, and I think of the progressive wing, which AOC reflects, and also the more mainstream wing, which is sort of the Biden Democrats, I'd suggest. And somehow they got them all to walk in lockstep.
That was the whole point. It was about unifying the party. It was about inspiring the Democratic masses. You even had Bernie Sanders there. So you had, and also this, the Democrats had an embarrassment of riches when it comes to presidents. Whenever you have a convention, you want to have previous presidents there. They had the benefit of a sitting president in Joe Biden leading off the convention, which is weird in and of itself. And you had Barack Obama last night. You'll have Bill Clinton tonight. And obviously you'll have they had Jason Carter, the grandson of Jimmy Carter. So you have the different, I'll say, historical factions of the Democratic Party. There are people who like Bill Clinton who aren't necessarily big fans of Joe Biden or Barack Obama, and vice versa. But you have all those disparate ideologies within the Democratic Party feeling represented. And so they all are putting their collective arms around Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and saying, these are our people, we support them. And it's almost like they're giving permission to those within the Democratic Party who might have been reticent to support. No. This is about all of us as Democrats, and they can move forward as in unison.
Yeah, and that path forward is only reachable if you win, which is what is always so interesting to me about the acrimony that has informed so much of the discourse on the Democratic side. Guys, if you don't win, you are going to get screwed so much bigger. They'll screw you bigly on the stuff you care about. So at some point, you have to fall in. And I guess that point is now. This is interesting, and I wanted to get your thought on it. John says, I thought it was interesting that Harris wasn't even there last night. Well, Harris, they did bring in from another rally in Milwaukee. Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, they were in Milwaukee at the very same location that the RNC held its convention and sold it out, which goes back to when we look at the metrics and the data. It'll be interesting to see how much the Democrats fundraised Just last night alone, they had two events which really weren't competing with each other. They're working in concert with each other, and they didn't lose a step in any way, which was mind-boggling to me. You thought they would almost cannibalize each other because people would rather see one event or the other, and they didn't have to worry about that at all. It was truly amazing.
This from Luis, a super chat.
Big shout out.
Mo is always a good thing. Mo is always a good thing, he says. Loyal listener of your KFI show. Glad you were here. Thanks much. Yeah, Mo, you're really cool to be here. So the theater of it was really strong. They produced a big night with the real luminaries of the Democratic Party, specifically the Obamas. But you also got the second gentleman speaking, and he was, and I'm not really sort of predisposed to like him. It's not that I dislike him, but I don't really have a feeling about him one way or the other. And I found myself utterly charmed by the guy last night.
Well, that's one of the benefits of not being a politician. Doug Emhoff doesn't need to be as polished. Michelle Obama doesn't necessarily need to be as polished, but also they have the sincerity factor where they can just tell stories about their spouse. They can talk from a place of not worrying about angering constituencies. They don't have to worry about people perceiving them as just trying to get elected or say things in which are not necessarily as sincere as they would be otherwise. And that is something where it's easier for Michelle Obama to have the type of speech that she had last night, which was very hard hitting. And it was very easy for Doug Emhoff to tell very personal stories about Kamala Harris, the woman that no one else would be able to tell. Absolutely no one else would be able to tell those stories about the woman, the mother, the stepmother, the person who she was when he met her, the blind date. Those anecdotes go a long way to humanizing her. And all this is part of strategy. You want someone who's relatable, who is humanized, and someone that you feel like has either walked in your shoes or understands you as a voter.
But it's not made up. I mean, that really happened, his date. And I love the self-effacing story where he talks about leaving a voicemail that went on, and he was talking and talking, and, you know, like you do with that nervous energy. I mean, these are all charming stories. And as I say, they make fun of, he made fun of himself. So you found it immediately endearing, of course. And then, as you say, he lays out all the specifics of who she is and what her values are, which is pertinent to the overall challenge of trying to win the White House. What were the other standout things to you as far as, I thought one of the things, I'll ask you and then I'll shut up, but I'll just share this one thing with you. I thought it was notable that the night was punctuated by Republicans, even those who had served in the administration of Donald Trump, who actually came to the convention to say, I'm supporting Kamala Harris. This guy can't be allowed near the White House again.
I thought it was important. It was poignant to not only the Republicans who might have been watching, but also disaffected Democrats who might have been watching. We saw what happened in 2016. There were a lot of people who either stayed home or made protest votes for Jill Stein because either they were supporting Bernie Sanders or they didn't like Hillary Clinton or whatever. And then what we got out of that was 3 Supreme Court justices nominated by then President Trump, and we saw what has happened since then. And the Republicans, I think, were, number one, giving permission to other Republicans to say it is okay to not necessarily support everything that the Democrats have and not support the Harris-Walz legislative agenda. But there's a clear and imminent danger and threat which has to be addressed. And let's say me as Stephanie Grisham or Adam Kinzinger, we are still Republicans, but we understand that we love America more than we love the Republican Party. And we are here falling on our sword, if you will, to say that this guy cannot be president again. I think it was very powerful. I think it was very important and also poignant.
You know, Albert, there's another. I sent you some other videos. I'm thinking in my mind, I know I sent you a video of cabinet officials who served under Trump who said that they don't, if I would suggest that as a backup, but if you have anything more from the convention, I'd love to run it now. There it is. This is Stephanie Grisham. Go ahead, Albert.
He calls them basement dwellers.
He's talking about his own.
On a hospital visit
Trump
one time,
talking about his own people. He's talking about his own supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. Go ahead.
when people were dying in the ICU, He was mad that the cameras were not watching him. He has no empathy, no morals, and no fidelity to the truth. He used to tell me, "It doesn't matter what you say, Stephanie. Say it enough and people will believe you." But it does matter. What you says matter, and what you don't say matters. When I was press secretary, I got skewered for never holding a White House briefing. It's because, unlike my boss, I never wanted to stand at that podium and lie. Now here I am, behind a podium, advocating for a Democrat. And that's because I love my country more than my party. Kamala Harris tells the truth. She respects the American people, and she has my vote.
I have a confession to make. I'm a lifelong Republican. So I feel a little out of place tonight, but I feel more at home here than in today's Republican Party. The grand old party has been kidnapped by extremists and devolved into a cult, the cult of Donald Trump. I have an urgent message for the majority of Americans who, like me, are in the political middle. John McCain's Republican Party is gone, and we don't owe a damn thing to what's been left behind.
So you're hearing from Republicans.
Yeah, there you go. So that was what I was referring to, Mo, and what you were talking about as well. This is a phenomenon, and you can tell me that I haven't seen or don't recall seeing at prior conventions. This kind of the appearance in sort of more than just one or two. These aren't just one-offs. This is a crew of people who are coming from the other side of the aisle to show up and go, hey, I worked for him, or I supported him, or I'm a mayor with an affiliation to his party, and I want no part of Donald Trump. I don't remember this ever happening before.
No, not to this degree. I know there were some Republicans, like maybe Susan Eisenhower during 2008, who came forward and spoke at the convention in support of Barack Obama. But these are people who are directly tied, for the most part, directly tied to either the Republican Party presently or Donald Trump very recently. Someone like Stephanie Grisham, who worked with him directly, who can speak to firsthand knowledge of the person, of the president, how he behaved, how he is dangerous. And I think to a reasonable person, that is compelling. And let's not forget, you and me, Mark, we follow this all year long. We follow the highs and lows and the intricacies of the politics, but most Americans don't. And so they may be just tuning in for the first time and just really learning the name of Stephanie Grisham and her truth for the first time. And people now will start paying attention and learning more about Donald Trump from his own people in a way that may not have paid attention to before, because now people are ramping up and making their decisions. If they're truly undecided, they're taking a look at both candidates and their behaviors and their speeches, their general demeanor, and then they're going from there.
How do you decode the undecideds, Mo? Do you think those are people who are just basically trying to decide whether or not to vote? That's kind of where I sit. Because if you really can't decide between Trump and Harris, I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, it's a day's drive between the two of them.
I think it's more than that. It's the true undecideds. You know, the people who are going to either stay home or not stay home, the undecideds of whether they're going to vote for Harris or they're going to vote for, let's say, RFK, or they're going to write in some candidate, if someone might be a Republican. And there's also the people who I think are, quote unquote, publicly MAGA, but don't want to necessarily vote for Donald Trump because no one knows what someone's going to do in that voting booth. If you're old enough to remember the Bradley effect, there was a LA mayor by the name of Tom Bradley, first black man possibly who's going to be governor of California. And he was leading in the polls up to election day. And then what happened was what they call the Bradley effect is people said one thing publicly and did something else when they went into the polls. I am not convinced that MAGA is as solid as people would have you to believe. I believe that there are a lot of women who may be publicly MAGA who will go in and vote their personal beliefs and priorities, which may lend more to the Harris-Walz ticket, but they would never admit it publicly.
The Bradley effect I saw the last time Trump ran against Hillary Clinton in 2015, 2016, I saw that effect as essentially not reflecting those who secretly would vote for Trump, that didn't want to admit they were going to vote for Trump.
Right.
It's funny that you see it now as sort of the other way, and that may be a fair way to see it, having sort of lived through the Trumpification of America during an actual Trump term.
Yeah, he's not abstract anymore. You know exactly what he is. And to vote for him is to endorse exactly what he plans to do, what he has done. And I think in 2016, it was very different. Say what you will about the demonization of Hillary Clinton, whether that was fair. Say what you will about the emails, whether that was a real story or not. People were voting against Hillary Clinton and for the idea of someone other than Hillary Clinton. Now you can't claim ignorance with Donald Trump. You know what I'll say a bereft person he is morally. You know exactly who he is, that he is deficient in all these departments of decency, dignity, and decorum. You can't deny that. And I think in the way that we've seen more Republicans come out and speak out against him, there will be more Republicans who may say one thing to their husband or to their wife, but when they get in the actual polling booth, they may say otherwise.
Strategically, from a political standpoint, one of the things I've maintained on this show, and it's not something that you'll hear very many places, is that Kamala Harris is facing this insistence that she sit down for an interview. And she's facing that from people who do interviews for a living, the media. Of course, they want their sit down with Kamala Harris. That's how they get their clicks, their eyeballs, their ears. I think she should shine them on. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, we haven't reached a tipping point, I don't think, where the public is demanding to hear from Kamala Harris in any sort of sit-down way. Now, you may on down the way want to do that, but I'd suggest to you, and I guess I'm asking whether or not you agree, I'd suggest to you, you can put this off. You can ride this wave. I mean, there is a considerable amount of momentum here. I don't see any reason to F with it.
It's not a thing, Mark. I mean, never have you had some sort of expectation that a candidate prior to actually garnering the nomination to sit down for a one-on-one interview. It's not a thing. It has never been a thing. This is a fabrication and a creation of those who would like to have, to your point, a one-on-one sit down with Kamala Harris. She does press gaggles after every campaign event. It's not that she's not answering questions. It's this false bar that someone has raised that she's supposed to jump over to sit down with Fox News or ABC or someone to do a one-on-one interview. And if she doesn't, like if she doesn't show up to the Fox debate, that means somehow that she must be afraid. I've worked in political media for decades. That has never been a thing. Would we like to have that sit down as a member of the media? Absolutely. But she has no obligation. Her obligation is to campaign, and the media's obligation is to cover that campaign. Now, whether she sits down with George Stephanopoulos or Brett Baier, that's up to her. But there's no sort of implicit requirement or expectation. That just and now that she's officially the nominee, then maybe we can start having that conversation. But prior to the convention, absolutely not. It's a farce.
Well, I think that, yeah, and our banner there, Kamala Harris criticized for not doing interviews. I would say the fraud of Kamala Harris being criticized for not doing interviews. I think it's a total fraud. It's really, again, it's a media hunt. They want that, and that's what they're hunting for, the sit down with Kamala Harris. But apart from them, it made no sense. So perhaps we get something in the weeks to come, but again, it'll be on different terms. And one of the false equivalencies, and then I'll move on, that I'm hearing is, hey, Donald Trump did a whole thing with Elon Musk. He sat there and they talked for an extended period of time. Dude, Elon Musk started that with a back rub for Donald Trump. It was unbelievable. One thing you won't hear from Lester Holt is, I'm endorsing you, I'm supporting you with my money, and I believe you're the guy for the future of America. You'll never hear David Muir say that or Lester Holt. It was not an interview in any sort of adversarial way. Elon Musk and Donald Trump did everything there but hold hands. It was so I think there's a false equivalency there, and that was sort of helping to animate a lot of those demands for the interview.
Yeah, and also I think there's a high degree of media illiteracy out there to not understand what an actual interview is. And that was basically an in-kind donation. That was almost a promotional piece. No, actually, it was a promotional piece for the campaign done by an advocate and surrogate for the campaign who has been working in concert with the campaign. That's not an interview. And unfortunately, we don't know the difference between a David Muir and an Elon Musk. We don't know the difference between a Sean Hannity and a Lester Holt. We don't. And there's a considerable amount of difference in between those individuals, but we're more advocating and fan rooting for these politicians, not actually asking for a probing interview.
I'm just seeing now, yeah, and I get a hard time like this, and you're familiar with it too. Delwood said, oh my, now media request being called a fraud. Mark has gone off the deep end of the pool. It was a fraud. It was a fraud of the media. And Mo just agreed with me. He didn't use the word fraud, but he said, the demands are coming from those who are in the world of demanding media sit-downs. The media, right? The people aren't longing for that yet. Now, as Mo also said just a moment ago, that may happen now that she's the nominee. But more to the point, Delwood, it was a fraud. I stand by my comment. So the last thing I have for you, Mo, is sort of a weird fact that I think we're dealing with in America now that we've never dealt with before, and here's what it is. And there's certainly been challenges to the vote in America. I think this is a troubled system with this ridiculous electoral college, with the women not getting the vote for a long time, with blacks not getting, even being recognized as citizens with voting rights. I mean, this is all through our history. That doesn't even begin to describe all the issues. There voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement. There's now voter disenfranchisement, just to pick up on the last thing I said, on a kind of industrial level. It's a serious thing that's happening. It's happening in Arizona. It's happening in Georgia as two states where it's really being pursued aggressively. I'm talking about GOP legal eagles going in to try to seriously get off the voting rolls a lot of people who are registered voters. You can Google this, everybody who's listening to me. There is a serious legal casework being done now to disenfranchise voters. The plan is, and this is what I'm getting to with you, Mo, to somehow throw this election into, with an inability to win the election. This is the narrative, okay? The GOP will throw this election into questions such that it's unclear, with neither candidate able to reach the threshold of 270 because you won't get certification of the vote in some of these states, that short of that, we want to get it to the Supreme Court, get it to the House of Representatives, where it's one state, one vote, and the GOP takes it that way. In other words, the people's voice less important, because the plan is to legally challenge, muddy the water, default to Supreme Court, and default to the House of Representatives. Can you speak to that plan?
Sure. There are a number of court cases right now where GOP operatives are trying to remove literally hundreds of thousands of people who are presently registered to vote from the voting rolls. Whether that's successful or not is neither here nor there. To your point, Mark, they want it to where it's just legally muddied enough where it keeps going up the judicial chain to eventually the Supreme Court. And let's say in Arizona, they're talking about 122,000 voters they're trying to remove from the rolls. Let's say they are successful. That throws into doubt the election results. Let's say they aren't successful. Then the GOP will again appeal that decision and say that the results, let's say the Arizona goes to Harris Walls, that the results are illegitimate because the 122,000 people were on the rolls, and it will send it up the chain. That takes time that delays the official certification in January. So you have a January 6th by a different name and a different method. And then you have the constitutional answer, which you alluded to, where it would go to Congress. This is not about having a free and fair election. This is about directing the eventual result of the election.
If you had to rate that possibility, Mo, I know it's impossible to rate it, but does it feel like a significant percentage chance, or 50-50, or less than 50-50?
We'll put it this way. I think it's 100% chance that if Harris Walz should win the election, in other words, be determined as the winner from the election, which could be a day or two after the actual election day, there is no world that I see that Donald Trump will concede or the GOP will concede. Where it goes from there, I'm not sure. There will be legal challenges. There will be all sorts of foolishness on the ground. I hope there's not another January 6th, but I just don't see a world in which this Donald Trump-led party, as he's the titular head of the Republican Party, will concede under any circumstances Harris Walz winning.
I'll sign on to that. That's exactly right. So you can hear Mo Kelly on iHeartRadio. He's got a podcast there of his radio show, but if you want to listen to him live, just tune into KFI Radio in Los Angeles and tune into iHeartRadio, and you can hear him live that way also every evening. Mo Kelly, love that you spend time with this man. Have some mad respect for your takes, and I look forward to the next time. Thanks, Mo.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime.
So long. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.